The question arrives like a spark in dry grass, quick, bright, and impossible to ignore. What if everything they have ever known, every star that seemed fixed above a childhood window, every choice, every heartbeat is only code? Not fantasy, not the comfort of fiction, but a proposition heavy enough to bend breath. The voice that guides them does not shout. It lowers the room's lights and lets the silence grow. In that silence, the sky itself begins to look like a screen. Across that screen, the galaxies stretch in patient swirls, a theater of impossible distances. The Fermi Paradox waits at the center like a stubborn knot. If the universe is vast and old, seeded with billions of stars and uncounted worlds, where is everyone? The probability suggests neighbors, elders, echoes of footsteps in the cosmic hallway. Yet the instruments report only hush. Telescopes widen their glass eyes, radio dishes swivel like sunflowers, and still nothing answers but the soft hiss of our own expectation. Solutions proliferate like whispered excuses. Perhaps life is rare, a statistical fluke as fragile as spun sugar. Perhaps great civilizations burn out, consumed by their own fire, a filter hidden in their future that none can pass. These are sober ideas, and they keep the night honest. But another possibility walks in quietly, carrying a colder logic. What if the silence is not emptiness, but policy? What if the program simply does not render neighbors beyond a certain horizon? Once named, the thought does not retreat. It grows roots in philosophy and physics, in tales told by culture where red pills and green code fall like rain. Thinkers sketch the argument: if any civilization can run many simulations of minds and worlds, then simulated beings will vastly outnumber biological ones. The odds tilt, and if they tilt enough, then the simplest explanation for a lawful, comprehensible universe might be design, not accident, intent, not chaos, a crafted stage, not primordial fog. From this angle, the paradox softens. A simulation that aims to study the rise of intelligence could throttle the appearance of others, either to conserve resources or to prevent contamination of the experiment. Rendering every advanced civilization would be like painting every leaf in a forest no one will walk through. Better to sketch tree lines, hint at distant peaks, and lavish detail only where observers stand. The silence then is not a mystery. It is a feature toggled in the settings. It might also explain the eerie fine-tuning of the physical constants, the delicate dials that sit exactly where life can flourish. In a simulation, parameters are not prayers, they are preferences. Gravity, charge, vacuum energy, all tuned for stability and narrative flow, not too chaotic, not too simple, just solvable enough for minds to arise and ask why. The algebra of being, elegant yet accessible, looks less like coincidence and more like the signature of a careful engineer hiding in plain sight. Then come the whispers about glitches, numbers that repeat where they should not, quantum outcomes that seem to wait for eyes, memories that argue with the record. Most are illusions, yet even illusions reveal the edges of perception. Within this frame, questions of agency sharpen. If their world is encoded, are their choices compressed into scripts, or does freedom bloom within constraints like jazz inside a scale? Perhaps the code requires improvisers, minds that can surprise the system and make the data sing. If so, meaning does not evaporate. It concentrates. A simulated sunrise still warms a real face. Purpose can spring from participation, to learn the rules, to seek the seams, to be kind inside the game. Tests may wait at the margins, in the grain of high-energy collisions, in computational limits that blur like digital horizons, in patterns too neat to be nature's accidents. The journey asks for witnesses. The voice invites them to follow, to like and subscribe, and to keep asking why. Because questions once opened do not close without a cost. The notion refuses to stay confined to thought experiments. It migrates into coffee-stained notebooks, late-night lab chats, and the hush of observatories where red lights glow like embers. People test the idea against their own routines. A quiet pressure on the mind, traffic lights switching with uncanny timing, backup servers blinking as if breathing. He watches patterns fold over patterns, and suspects design where he once sighed and said chance. She feels it too, a tug when the sky is too clear, when the math clicks into place with a soundless click that is almost music. Yet the story is older and stranger than neon rain and trench coats. Philosophers once sketched trilemmas about ancestors and descendants, about how many worlds a single civilization could spin from light and logic. The popular touchstones serve as doors, but they are not the house. Behind them stands an austere argument. If minds can be emulated, and if many emulations are cheap, then typical minds are born inside code. The conclusion is not romance, it is arithmetic dressed in patience. From there, the Fermi riddle loosens. A simulation that prizes clarity downsamples the distant and allocates its fidelity to the near. It budgets all like memory. Instead of teeming skies, it keeps the model sparse, a strategic silence that protects the purpose of the run. Advanced neighbors would complicate the metrics, seed crosstalk, add noise to the trace. Better a sanitized sandbox, where a single lineage climbs alone, so the curves of culture, ethics, and error can be measured without interference. A fog of war for cosmology, not malice, just method. Fine-tuning, once a theological whisper, becomes a signature of specification. Cosmological constants sit in Goldilocks ranges not because a dice throw landed perfectly, but because a builder constrained the search. The vacuum energy is not a miracle. It is a parameter chosen to allow structure and story. The laws seem legible because legibility is a design goal. Mathematics becomes an interface, smooth where it must be, rugged where it spurs creativity. Even the deep weirdness of quantum rules can be reimagined as a compression scheme, a way to store all possible histories efficiently until an observation demands resolution. So the hunt for glitches is not voyeuristic, it is methodological. He remembers airline engineers tracing phantom resets to cosmic rays, bits flipped by particles from the sun. She recalls delayed choice experiments where outcomes wait until questions are asked, as if the world postpones detail until summoned. There are memos about accelerators brushing against opaque thresholds, whispers about symmetry breaking that feels like rounding. Most of it has ordinary explanations, but the lens is new. Not every seam is a tear, but every seam hints at construction. And sometimes the déjà vu arrives like a draft through a closed window. Inside that draft, agency breathes. If this is code, must their choices be scripted? The worry curls tight, then loosens. Freedom can bloom under constraint, like improvisation inside a time signature. Cellular automata show it in miniature. Simple rules, emergent beings, patterns that chase, collide, and compute. Give a mind a stage and it will invent meaning. He chooses to forgive an old friend and feels the choice as real as pain. She decides to study a sterile equation and finds a living landscape. Even if outcomes are bounded, paths can vary, and variation is a kind of grace. They begin to ask how to lift the hood without breaking the ride. One plan seeks telltale discretization, a pixel grid at the bottom of space, perhaps a limit in the highest energies where waves refuse to smooth. Others watch the cosmic microwave background, searching for fingerprints, corner effects, low multipole mischief that looks like a frame. If existence is curated, then kindness still matters. Curiosity still glows. The voice returns, steady, not urgent, inviting witnesses to stay for the next turn, to like and subscribe, and to keep watching the silence for what it might be about to say. Latency becomes a kind of law. The speed limit of light reads like a network constraint, a maximum update rate that keeps distant regions from needing simultaneous detail. He imagines a profiler over space-time, throttling bandwidth to galaxies and giving priority to the tube of experience where attention pools. She thinks about the rare Earth hypothesis and hears the click of feature flags. Complex life toggled on here, off almost everywhere else, not as an insult, but as a method to isolate variables. The great filter stops being a looming guillotine and becomes scaffolding. The simulation could stage bottlenecks on purpose, test after test to map how a species handles energy, information, and violence. Why populate the sky with elder empires when a single exemplar provides a full curve? Silence is not absence, it is experimental hygiene. Even star formation in metallicity gradients can be read as resource triage, limiting viable seeds without making the garden look fake. In the lab, they chase anomalies. The Hubble tension refuses to sit still. Early and late cosmos whispering different expansion stories, as if a patch rolled out mid-run and the edges have not blended. Fast radio bursts snap like heartbeats, regular and bizarre. A status ping from nowhere that ends as quickly as it begins. Ultra-high energy cosmic rays hit soft ceilings, as though a variable clamps the top of the curve. It is easy to overfit meaning, they warn each other, yet hard not to feel the room tip when coincidences pile up. Assume we are inside it, he says one night, voice low. What do we owe the outside? She tastes the question and lets it sit. Maybe nothing, as she replies, or maybe everything. Maybe the test is kindness under unprovable doubt. The words hang between them like a bridge. It is not despair they feel, but a new sobriety, a careful joy that treats every interaction as real in itself and potentially observed for patterns beyond their sight. Agency breathes again, not as denial but as defiance. They picture the world as a sandbox with deep physics and porous edges where requests and responses interleave. quantum choices do not vanish into a script. They branch into histories, and within those branches, intention can guide. Emergence is the loophole, the way simple constraints explode into stories no designer could predict in detail. Free will, then, is not exemption from law, but participation in a law that leaves room. They sketch tests that do not burn the stage. Global synchronized measurements of random quantum events timed to celestial clocks could stress the scheduler, revealing subtle correlations that should not exist. They talk about scanning the cosmic microwave background for low-entropy patches that look like compression artifacts. They look to the distribution of physical constants for algorithmic signatures, digits that compress suspiciously well. Each proposal comes with humility. The line between a glitch and a new natural law is thin, and hubris loves pareidolia. Their nights grow quieter, and purpose sharpens. If the silence is curated, then ethics is not an afterthought. The absence of neighbors hands them a mirror. They test how they treat the vulnerable, how they steward their planet, how they resist turning wonder into ownership. He deletes a cruel joke before posting. She writes to a student who has fallen behind and sends a paper that might spark. Small acts, unglamorous, become their revolt against indifference, whether cosmic or human. Meaning thickens at the edges of their days. The simulation frame does not shrink the sky. It gives it context, like a museum wall that frees a painting. They keep looking up and they keep asking. If there is an author, they will meet in conduct. If there is only code, they will write within it. And if this inquiry moves you, if you want the next turn in this unfolding thread, add your voice. Stay with the search, like the story, and subscribe to its continuation, because the silence, curated or not, is not finished speaking. Morning light finds them in the ordinary world, where coffee cools beside notebooks and the hum of servers becomes a kind of prayer. They keep the quiet pact they made under the suspicion of code. Do the test, but do no harm. Invitations thread across continents, stitched through forums and late-night video calls. A patient chorus of curious minds. They settle on a synchronized experiment, a collective toss of quantum coins, each station keyed to the heartbeat of a millisecond pulsar. The timing will be exquisite. As if asking the universe a very polite question all at once and waiting to see if the scheduler blinks. On the chosen night, screens glow like small moons in bedrooms, labs, and garages. The rhythm of the pulsar ticks through software and detectors whisper their outcomes. He watches the stream tighten and loosen as the network strains. She watches faces in thumbnail windows, strangers who feel like kin by virtue of shared awe. For an hour, the world leans toward the same uncertainty. And then the data collapses into files waiting to be read. They resist the urge to declare anything except that it happened, that 1,000 places breathed together and left a record. The analysis is slow, and they treat it like fragile glass. A hint appears, correlations that seem to rise and fall with the pulsar's phase, a tremor just above randomness, then melting when the window slides. They argue gently over bandwidth artifacts and timestamp jitter, building and subtracting explanations until the hint loses its dramatic edge. Suspense dissolves into a quieter revelation. The search itself can be precise and humble without becoming naive. She smiles at the screen and writes, "We need another run with better clocks," he replies, "and more patience than certainty." They widen the program. Interferometers look for faint pixelation in the interference pattern, an echo of lattice spacings that would betray a discretized space. Telescopes map the cosmic microwave background with fresh eyes, scanning spherical harmonics for compression fingerprints like repeated motifs in a tapestry. A group of mathematicians test digits of fundamental constants for compressibility beyond what known algorithms predict, while an astrophysics team hunts for energy-dependent delays in gamma-ray bursts that would suggest a budgeted rendering of high-energy events. Everywhere, the work alternates between wonder and debugging. Everywhere, the line between discovery and error is a hair's breadth. At night, she climbs to the roof and lets the cold find her cheeks. The sky is so calm it feels designed to soothe mammal brains into thinking they are safe. "If this is a stage," she murmurs, "it is still a sky." He rides a late train and watches the tunnel lights stutter, a human-made heartbeat in concrete. He thinks of those who came before, who read omens in lightning and found gods in storms, and he wonders if they too were testing, hiding questions inside rituals so the world might answer without breaking. Meaning continues to rearrange their days. The more they suspect constraints, the more their choices feel like music written for a specific instrument, noble precisely because the keys are finite. Free will is not an explosion but a dance, they decide, and the measure of it is whether we use our steps to lift others. She turns a meeting into a listening session and learns the needs behind the work. He returns a message from an old friend with more care than habit would offer. Both imagine an audience beyond their understanding, not as judges but as witnesses to how creatures negotiate kindness when no applause is guaranteed. They release their data and their methods openly, bracing for noise and conspiracy. There are loud voices hungry for shortcuts, eager to swap patience for drama, and quieter ones who ask beautiful hard questions that make the project better. They curate without gatekeeping, holding a center line. The hypothesis is serious. The bar for evidence is higher still. When the first preprint appears hinting at a lattice signal, they read past the headline, follow the pipeline, and find the calibration bug singing like a siren under the graphs. Relief, not triumph, warms them. The world remains sturdy and strange. If the program exists, it may never permit a teardown. Maybe its purpose tolerates curiosity but not breach. Maybe the test is whether intelligence can build meaning within boundaries rather than claw past them. This thought does not bruise them anymore. It focuses them. Beauty, service, and rigor become their coordinates. They imagine a future episode where a small deviation survives every filter and forces a rewrite of textbooks. They also imagine years of nothing but cleaner understanding of old laws. Both futures feel worth living. Through each turn, the invitation remains the same. Stay with the question, do the careful work, and carry one another through the ambiguity. If this journey speaks to the part of you that wants the sky to tell the truth, come closer, lend your attention, add your hands. Help gather, test, and refine. And if you want to follow as the next results arrive, the simple gesture matters. Like this search and subscribe to keep walking with it. Because the silence, curated or not, is still forming its answer. Morning folds into another evening as their work hardens from idea into protocol. The flood of suggestions becomes a map. They sort by what could truly break, not flatter, the hypothesis. Edges are chosen where measurement meets meaning, where a mistaken romance can be seen and dismissed before it writes headlines. They decide to ask the sky questions that a thrifty program would struggle to fake without paying a price. At a whiteboard scuffed to a gentle grey, she sketches tests like constellations. If space-time is grainy, high-energy light from distant explosions should arrive slightly out of tune, the hurry of photons snagging on microscopic teeth. If computation is budgeted, the entropy of exoplanet atmospheres might plateau with distance, richness flattened not by nature but by depiction. If clocks share a hidden scheduler, a ring of observatories could catch global micropauses, tiny hollows in time where maintenance breathes. He adds a quieter ambition, to prove themselves wrong beautifully. They visit the radio array on a night so clear the frost seems to listen. Dishes tilt toward pulsars, those clocks built from ruin, and the air shines with the invisible grammar of timing. She feels the sting of cold and closeness, the way a near answer pricks the skin. He imagines unseen gardeners pruning complexity so the garden holds. Meaning does not wait for permission, it slips into their gloves and follows them indoors. If this is built, they tell each other, then goodness is cooperation with the build, not vandalism of its walls. Free will feels like choreography on a finite stage, noble precisely because the steps are counted and still made generous. They draft a bit economy. Emptiness is cheap, detail is costly, so a prudent engine paints lavishly near observers and sparsely in deserts of relevance. From that, a test emerges they try to kill before it speaks. Spectral entropy of biosignatures versus distance, corrected for every trick instruments play. Back in the lab, coffee and ozone thread the air while code grows cautious and bright. Randomness becomes texture, not void. Quantization checks for redshift bins are blinded. Preferred direction searches hide their axes until the last switch. The memory of a beautiful error keeps their hands slow, their claims provisional. When a scatter plot looks obedient, they scramble labels and ask strangers to guess the hypothesis before daring to hope. The project spills outward like warm light in winter. Teenagers write that the night feels wider. A musician sends a piece spun from pulsar residuals, all glass and heartbeat. Someone admits they fear love would shrink if choices are constrained. She answers that love is a practice under limits, not the absence of limits. He records a note about dread and play, how meaning is not erased by being modeled, only invited to show its work. Ethics stays central, a compass laid on the table before any new expedition. They refuse experiments that gamble with harm or flirt with catastrophic interrupts. Instead, they plan softly disruptive probes. A round-the-world ring of observatories sampling a bright pulsar at high cadence to stress any scheduler of causality. Entangled photons guided by starlight from opposite skies to starve the program of advanced knowledge. Tests that bite without drawing blood. Days fold and a hiccup appears in the pulsar ring. A recurring phase slip too small to trust, too consistent to ignore, aligning with moments when global timekeepers massage the world. It could be infrastructure bleeding into nature. It could be nature agreeing to a hint of housekeeping. She schedules more nights and refuses the romance. He petitions for cave clocks, dark and stubborn, far from satellites and applause. Winter leans hard, metal in the weather, but a forecast opens like a door. Clear air over 3 continents and a moon bright enough to keep the human world awake. Their queue runs. Write notes strangers can follow or dismantle and set out thermoses for the long watch. Attention steadies them. Beneath it, something tautons, almost ready to sing in the dark. On the long bright night, instruments breathe like animals. The ring comes alive, telescopes listening to the same lighthouse pulse skipping across continents. When the phase slip returns, it does not crow. It arrives with the hush of a librarian, aligning again with the small adjustments that keep human clocks polite. The cave clocks hold stubbornly still, and still the sky leans with them. The drift contracts near those underground metronomes, as if whatever schedules cause and effect respects dark places that refuse the broadcast. They add another cadence to the analysis, and the plot lifts like a gull on a thermal. Not proof, but shape. At dawn, the entangled photons finish their cold dance. Starlight culled from opposite horizons chooses detector settings after the pairs have already leapt, starving any knowing host of foresight. The bias they feared shows faintly and then recedes when the guiding stars are more ancient, their light older than any terrestrial custom, as if distance and age thinned the program's ability to prearrange. It is a smudge on the glass, not a signature, but the pattern rhymes with the pulsar's civility, economy, locality, thrift. She prints the figures and will not let adjectives decide. He walks past the window and thinks of empty galaxies like hallways left dark to save power. They do not declare victory. They open the doors and invite accusation. When the world answers, a few voices call it confirmation. Others call it noise. In the quiet between replies, the larger question leans forward. If the silence of intelligent neighbors is coded, what does that ask of the ones who can hear? The theory settles like weather. A prudent architect would cap complexity where attention is sparse, prune the growth of rival infrastructures, compress distant civilizations into suggestive fog. Fine-tuning would not be miracle but parameter, a sweet spot for chemistry that also fences in upward leaps. The great silence becomes housekeeping, a feature flag set for stability and study. In that light, the absence hurts less like rejection and more like design, severe and oddly intimate. He remembers their old note about dread and play. She repeats, half smiling, that love under limits is not smaller. Agency then is choreography within rules, meaning earned by the grace of how steps are chosen. If the stage is simulated, valor looks like clear consent to be seen and to see, the promise to act as if stakes are more than costumes. If the stage is not, the promise remains. Under both stories, kindness still changes the temperature of a room. They draft a public plan that lives between caution and courage. Share code, blind analyses, failure modes. Propose new probes that neither gamble with harm nor prod the world hard enough to cause a crash. Look for computational ceilings, energy thresholds where arithmetic bleeds into physics, pixel boundaries in cosmic rays, compression fingerprints in background noise. Encourage amateurs to reproduce the pulsar effect with cheap antennas and stubborn patience. If the builders exist, let them know we are tidy guests. The upload goes live without trumpet. The narrator's voice is calm. The image is austere. The request simple. Examine, repeat, disagree, help. He speaks to the lens not as a prophet, but as someone holding a candle in a strange cathedral. She adds a quiet coda about care, about our responsibility to each other, whatever the roof above us is made of. They end with a question instead of a verdict. What is meaning to you if the stars are code? Before the credits, the voice returns friendly and unshy. If this conversation matters to you, if the search felt like oxygen, stay with it. Like the video, leave a comment with your doubts, and subscribe so the next test meets you where you are. In a built world or a blooming one, community is the only instrument that scales.